Can Liberia's opposition coalition beat George Weah? Today we're stepping away from Nigeria for a bit to discuss politics in a neighboring country. And here's today's big hard fact. Now, of course, this neighboring country has a deep shared history. And today's big hard fact, Lagos, is that since the end of the Civil War, Liberia has elected 3 presidents in 4 elections. Charles Taylor in 1997, Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf in 2005 and 2011, and George Weah in 2017. Now, under the Constitution, presidents can serve 2 terms max of 6 years each. So this year, Weah's first term comes to an end, and there's a growing coalition of opposition parties hoping to defeat him at the polls in October. Our guest today is the leader of one of those parties, the Movement for One Liberia. Magdala Cooper, welcome to Hard Facts. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It's good to be here with you.
Now, Magdala was supposed to be in the studio with me, but we understand that she's currently in Bayelsa at the moment, and so she's joining us virtually. Lagos, you can watch the interview live. Facebook, Nigeria Info 99.3, YouTube, Nigeria Info FM. If you've got questions about the upcoming elections in Liberia, go ahead and give us a call on 0700-993-993-993. Your party, Magdala, the Movement for One Liberia, it is relatively new, but it has made a lot of waves. What's the ideology behind your party? Who are you trying to give a voice to?
Well, I participated in the previous presidential election in 2016, 2017.
Yes.
To be exact. And after my experience with participating in an election, trying to win or focus and win an election, a lot of the party I was on was just, there was a lot of politicking within the party. And so I sort of studied the terrain and realized that political parties were boys' club, made by the boys, created by the boys, for the boys, and they served the boys. And so women were not necessarily welcome to the boys' club. And so I built a girls' club. And of course, as a mother, a sister, and a wife, and I decided, well, we'll build a girls' club, but also let the boys in too, and show them how to play the game right.
Now, I want to come back to that, your initial declaration of your intention your initial run a few years ago, but you also initially declared your intention to run for president this year. But now in May, you and your party endorsed Joseph Boakai. What made you change your mind? Why are you backing the former vice president?
Well, look, there are several reasons, and I will keep it short. The former vice president is someone who I see, and based on data and national opinion polls, that will get us the win that we need. And so it made sense, since we had similar agenda for the country, which is to rescue Liberia from the hands of George Weah and his failed administration, his incompetent administration. It was important to join forces to build a stronger team to defeat Weah in 2023's election. And so it was no question in my mind that it was necessary to join forces with several other opposition parties to put our weight behind the former vice president, who is the choice of the Liberian people at this moment. He is the only one that's actually relevant in this election. And so I'm happy I made the right choice once again, as I always do. And we are working now to make him the next president of Liberia, to free Liberia from this horrible situation we're in.
And I want to talk about this movement for One Liberia. It's often criticized the Weah administration of being controlled by a ruling elite who are not interested in providing inclusive service to all Liberians. You've endorsed Boakai. Boakai was vice president to Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf. The Sirleaf administration was also accused of being elite-centric. Why do you believe Boakai will be different from his predecessors?
Well, first thing, Boakai was the number 2 wingman to Ellen. He was, her number 2. He was not the one in charge of her administration. He was there to support her and follow her agenda, and she created the agenda. It wasn't his agenda. Of course, they worked together, and he was the president of the Senate, because that's what our Constitution, that's the position he gets as the vice president of the country. And so Bokai was sort of limited in a way as to what agenda he could push. It was Madame Sirleaf who was the lead on their administration. And so she called most of the shots. And he was, vice presidential post is always ceremonial. When a president cannot do something, then the vice president is designated to represent on an agenda that's created by the president. And so I would say whatever accusations or notions that was there around the presidency or the administration of Madame Sirleaf, I think Bokai had very little to do with it because of his limitation as a vice president. And you don't want to be a vice president that's pushing your own agenda. It could be considered, in some way, shape, and form, if misinterpreted, it could be treason, right? Because you're trying to take over from your boss. And so Bokai has a track record, 40 years track record of being Liberia's body politics, being leadership, being in government, and he has a clean hand. And after watching George Weah clans of so-called elite, the nouveau riche, as we call them, that had absolutely no experience, no background, had no understanding of what government meant. They all came into power and overnight they built mansions and big houses without having an experience on how to run a country, how to build an economy, have an agenda for the nation, what we're going to do. They came in with this pro-poor agenda that we're going to rescue the poor. And the poor in Liberia society are more poor under Weah's pro-poor agenda than they ever were in Liberia history. We just celebrated 176 years of independence. Liberia remains the oldest democracy on the continent, not just in the region, but the continent. When other countries were trying to find liberation or fight for liberation, Liberia was trailblazing. You have, Queen Elizabeth and all those folks coming to visit Liberia. And today, we are regressing massively under the leadership of George Weah. George Weah came in as a footballer, an excellent world best footballer, Africa's best. The man is fantastic at football. He is the best. But when it comes to governance and leadership, George Weah has absolutely no idea how to run a country, or even what it means to hire the right people to advise him, or what it means to even establish the proper cabinet to run a government. And we can't have another 6 years of that.
Okay, I hear you, and what you've just said is something we've often heard people who are in politics or who support politicians in Nigeria say about vice presidents when those vice presidents decide to run for office and they get asked, well, you were a part of this government that you now think is so bad and we should trust you, we should go with you, we should work with you. And the question I often ask people like that, and I'm going to ask you as well, if Bokai did not agree with Sirleaf's policies, should he have resigned?
No, not at all. Because I will say, compared to where we are now, the Sirleaf's government seems like a light on a hill, and we wish we could return to those days. So, irrespective of the criticism that is placed on Sirleaf's government, that was co-ran by Bokai, that government was much better than anything we're seeing today. And the Liberian people are even crying to go back to the days of Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf. And since she has already completed her constitutional term limits, or 2 terms, 6 years per term, she cannot come back. So the next thing in line is Joseph Bokai. But I will say this to your question. Again, Joseph Bokai was a supporter of the administration. We were not in a terrible situation. Of course, the opposition then, which was the CDC, the Weah-led political party, was the then opposition. And so, of course, they criticized Madame Sirleaf's government. They criticized her massively. They even went as far as disrespecting her in a way of, showing her underwear on the streets of Liberia, carrying a casket saying that she was the dead one in the casket. They couldn't wait to see her die. They were utterly disrespectful. And so we are not here to listen to their criticism, because Madame Sirleaf ran a 2 successful term, which George Weah will wish he would even complete a first term successfully, with even any credibility. Monies are missing out of Liberia's economy. Gone. Containers filled with newly printed bills. Gone. Auditors in Liberia murdered in cold blood. The roads are not built. They came to campaign on this, I will build the roads across Liberia, plan. Never happened. Our government is completely destroyed. Our country, there are no jobs. We've lost more jobs than any other time in our history. under the Weah administration. And so Joseph Boakai being a former vice president within
Magdala? All right, we seem to have lost connection with Magdala Cooper. If you just joined the show, Magdala Cooper is a politician from Liberia, and her and her party have created a movement for One Liberia. It's relatively new, but they're making a lot of waves. So they are a growing coalition of opposition parties hoping to defeat George Weah at the polls. George Weah became president in 2017. And today we're talking about that process, and hopefully we regain connection with our guest and we can keep having this conversation. Lagos, join us on 0700-993-993, 01465-7190. Magdala, you were talking a bit about some of the issues on the minds of Liberians as they prepare to go to the polls in October. Give us a big picture. What are the big issues on the minds of Liberians as you go to vote?
The economy, jobs, if we can, we the Liberian people, we have the first year. Normally, you give a president the first 100 days to see where they're going to go with their administration, the newly formed or created administration. Mm-hmm. And we waited for 1 year. We didn't see any change, any impact. Waited for 2 years. The midterm elections came. The Weah-led party, the CDC, Congress for Democratic Change, mm-hmm. Put out 15 candidates within the midterm senatorial race. Mm-hmm. 3 out of the 15 won their seats in the Senate. 3 out of 15 from the ruling party won their seats. Because by the midterm election, the problems we're facing today was already visible in Liberia. Hmm. Most people had lost their job. They came up with an agenda to harmonize the economy by cutting civil servant salaries. And we saw nothing that was done with the funds that were gained from cutting civil servants' salaries. Mm-hmm. And so people thought, okay, maybe you had a good intention to cut salaries, and a few people lost their jobs. But what was the benefit of that particular project? Mm-hmm. What was the benefit of that particular process? And so when you say what's on the minds of the Liberian people as they go to the polls today, mm-hmm. they are thinking hunger. Liberia came out when the World Hunger's List came out just a few months ago. Liberia was 113 out of 121 countries listed, mm-hmm. with the highest number of people who are hungry. There's no food in Liberia. People don't have jobs. The medical facilities are not functioning. The education sector, people cannot be afforded. And so we don't have a nation that's working for us. So as the people go to polls, they're thinking about the problems we inherited the first year of Weah's-led administration. Up to 6 years later, we still see the same problem increasing. More jobs are leaving the country.
Magdala, do we have... Okay, so we seem to have lost our connection with Magdala again. Magdala says the economy is the biggest thing on the minds of Liberians as they go to vote in October. She says a huge loss of jobs. She says that Liberians expected that the money saved from cutting the salaries of civil servants would be redirected towards improving the lives of Liberians, that they haven't seen that happen. Magdala is back now. Magdala, apologies about that interruption earlier on. Is she back? Okay, we don't have the connection back with her just yet. But yes, Lagos, of course, you can talk about what you're hearing so far. It does sound like you're hearing about Nigeria's problems, doesn't it? Okay, so we have her back now, Magdala. Apologies about your poor internet connection. But yes, you were telling us about the loss of jobs, the hunger on the minds
right.
of the people, the insane poverty as the
yes.
people go to the polls in October. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And the sad reality is that you see a handful of people, which you mentioned earlier, the handful of nouveau riche in Liberia living this excess life, traveling to Paris, and they are taking selfies and putting on social media as Liberians are going to bed hungry. Children are dying in hospitals because parents don't have money to pay for medical bills, to pay the medical bills. And you have these government officials with their big houses, their cars, and they're violently exhibiting and displaying this in front of the country and its people. And it's sad. It's very hard for a citizen of a country to come on another country's television show to discuss these issues. These are Liberia's national issues. But the reason why I'm even on here is, in the 1990s, we had a civil war in Liberia. And when the war happened, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Guinea, and all of the bordering countries inherited the citizens of Liberia because Liberia was not able to take care of Liberians. Now other countries' economy suffer because we had to flee our country to come to seek refuge in your country.
Yeah.
And for me, this is a clarion call to leaders across Africa, especially with the region. We don't want another outbreak in Liberia. We don't. We, the beloved citizens of Liberia, we are pleading with the international community, with the regional community, to say, look, we have a serious problem here, and these problems need to be addressed quickly. If we continue to put leaders in place when the citizens are crying out loud and saying, we have a problem, no one listens. When the people take the matter into their own hands, these countries' economies suffer. It is time that we start supporting each other across the region to see when the citizens are not happy, we start finding solutions and not supporting the problem.
You see, you've run for office in Liberia at various levels, right? And as you get ready to go to the polls, as you're getting ready with your opposition coalition, I wonder how you would assess your country's electoral system and its level of transparency. Can opposition, and that was a very interesting sound, can opposition politicians reasonably expect to unseat the incumbent?
Oh, absolutely. The people of Liberia, and I told some of this fact the other day. I remember the 2017 election when when the campaign officially opened by the Election Commission. We watched people come from distances to walk towards the now President George Weah's political party's ground. It was this excitement. It was this, oh, he's a son of the soil and he understands our struggle. He comes to the ghettos and the slums. He made it to superstardom. And we know the young people are saying this. They said, we know if he becomes president, he will understand our plight and he will rescue us or help us out of the problems that we find ourselves in. So the expectations were high. These young people pour into this camp. And when this election was won, of course, there were other opposition leaders who were concerned about the Election Commission's ability to conduct a fair election. And don't forget, the candidate I support today was the incumbent vice president. And Weah was still able to defeat him, although he was an incumbent vice president. And so I have some faith in the Election Commission as an agency. Where my faith is lacking is in the political appointees the president made into the Election Commission. Because when presidents come in, unlike the INEC in Nigeria and Ghana and other countries, we have a National Election Commission, and the president holds the responsibility of selecting or appointing the commissioner's head and several others in the commission.
Same here.
And so I didn't know that's how you guys work, which I think it's really should be the opposite direction.
Okay, we have lost connection again to Magdala Cooper. Hopefully we rejoin her, or she rejoins us, and we can keep talking about whether or not she has faith in Liberia's electoral system and its level of transparency. She says that she does. However, she has a problem with the appointments that were recently made by Liberia's President George Weah. She also believes that the incumbent can be unseated by the opposition political parties, opposition political coalitions. Okay. If she rejoins, we will continue this conversation because I'm very interested in a couple of other things. For instance, why she joined politics, what pushed her to join politics, and she also talked, when we started earlier on, she talked about building a girls' club. I want to talk about that a bit. You know me, Lagos. Of course, I want to talk about that a little bit. So hopefully she rejoins. I'm getting word that she has rejoined now, Magdala. Yes. So
Yes,
you were
I'm here.
saying to me that while you trust the system, the electoral system itself, you have a problem with the people that have been appointed to man the system. Now,
Right.
does that worry translate to, I'm not sure we will be able to unseat an incumbent? Because here in Nigeria, our current head of the Electoral Commission is facing allegations of some sort of complicity with the elections that a number of organizations, external and internal, have labeled as very, very flawed, very deeply flawed. So if you can you really trust the system if the people who have to push buttons within the system you don't trust?
Right. Early on in the year, are you there, Sandra?
Yes.
I think, did I lose you? Are we there?
I'm right here. We're here. We're live.
Okay. Okay. So early on in the year, we noticed that during the BVR process, the voters registration, there was a lot of manipulation within the voters registration,
In Liberia.
and we knew right there and then there was an attempt to rig this election, because we've never seen a BVR process that went the way this particular one went. So we had no faith in the process from the get-go.
Okay.
Because again, the folks who were appointed to push the buttons were doing everything in there to please their boss. So that's where our lack of faith in them came.
Okay, and why do you think that if they were manipulating, according to you, the BVR process, that the elections, will go transparently?
Well, this is why we, the opposition body, the entire opposition bloc, has to do all we can to make sure we mend the polls by having poll watchers that are not easily bought, and making sure we do our part, and also call on the region and call on the international community for support with regards to observers. We have to make sure from the day those ballot papers are printed, we have to count them and check them. Make sure on the day of the election, when those ballot papers and those ballot boxes reach the polling centers, they are washed, and make sure our poll watchers are sitting there. And even if the incumbent, because we already got so many different, it starts with rumors, and then you verify the intelligence that they're looking to pay. They got $3 million set aside to pay opposition poll watchers to bribe them on the day of election. And so we are getting all of this intelligence, and we are going to take them in consideration and counteract them. So as we get these intelligence, we verify them and we counteract them. So we are going to do everything we can. But I will say this much. Weah should be very careful on how he tried to rig Liberia's election. He's a very unpopular candidate. He's a very unpopular president. His approval rating, according to the national opinion polls, is at 32%. 32%, and it keeps plummeting. It keeps going down. So we know what direction the country is going to, and if he tries to change it into a direction that the country doesn't want, trust me, it will not be good for him.
All right. Lagos, we've had Magdala Cooper join us. She's a politician from Liberia. We'll take a break. When we come back from this break, we'll talk to her a bit more. We'll talk to her because, we're all West Africans, right? We're all seeing what's playing out in Niger. So if there's a problem in one, it's going to affect the rest of the region. And that's why it's important to have these conversations that we're having. So we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll keep talking to Magdala. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili. You're listening to Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Don't go away.
Talk.
The biggest reality TV show in Africa is back. Get ready for double wahala as the stars pepper them.
as 600k extra. Yes, every month, just driving your car to work or traveling. And if you don't have a car but want to enjoy nice and cheaper rides to your destination, just use my Co-Pilot app.
That's babes.
Find car owners going your way and pay less transport. Stop spending all your money on transport.
You just solved my problem, oh. God bless you.
What are you waiting for? Download my Co-Pilot ride-sharing app today. Available on Android and iOS. Or visit www.mycopilot.ng.
My Co-Pilot. Make money, travel safer and cheaper.
My brother, I not fit to find my shares, so it be like say all the money where I put for shares done lost. So
That one not small matter now. You never hear of ISF? ISF not the Integrated Shares Finder, where Integrated Trust and Investment carry come. Now him be the bonge product where go help you find your missing shares and dividends. With the taking money, you could just register for ISF, and ISF will get your shares and dividends back sharp. You find your shares just to call 0901 502 5992 or 0703 041 6997 or check our website for www.integratedtrustng.com. Abi make you come our head office for Integrated Trust Office 61 Marina Lagos or office for Ibadan and Abuja. ISF. Now the sure way to find your missing shares and dividends.
Uncle Dentist, what are cavities and how does Colgate protect my teeth from cavities? Does it use Kung Fu?
No, dear. Most tooth pains are caused by tooth holes called cavities. When you brush daily with Colgate Maximum Cavity Protection, its expert formula locks natural calcium in our teeth and helps protect them from cavities.
It's time to upgrade to the world's most chosen toothpaste, Colgate, because Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out!
Colgate is recommended by the Nigerian Dental Association.
Naija people with the yarn better tori abeg.
Man like Osimhen, Baba just dey chop Italian league like Chelsea want am. Man, you dey wait, even Mourinho dey hate. Come off it.
No one tells a story like we do. Stream live football, local and international shows on Showmax, Africa's original streaming service. Sign up at showmax.com.
Entries are now open for the 2023 Maltina Teacher of the Year competition. Are you a teacher in any private and public school? Apply now at www.maltinateacheroftheyear.com. It's quick and easy. Fill out the form online or download it, fill it out, and email your entry to maltinateacheroftheyear@heineken.com. There will be winners at state and national levels. The overall winner will receive a grand prize of 6.5 million naira and attend an international training program, while their school also receives a 20 million naira educational project. Wow! Applications now close August 4th, 2023. Entry is free. Terms and conditions apply. Maltina Teacher of the Year is proudly endorsed by the Federal Ministry of Education and supported by Air Peace and Stanbic IBTC Bank. Maltina Teacher of the Year, rewarding excellence in teaching.
Maltina, share happiness.
If you're Nine Mobile, then you're most definitely enjoying ridiculously affordable data. Like 4.2 gigabytes for only 1,000 naira. 1K, hold on, you also get 6.5 gigabytes for 1,200 naira. And 9.5 gigabytes at guess how much? 2,000 naira. Come on, guys. Join Nine Mobile now or dial *301# to choose from our affordable and reliable data plans to express yourself freely on Niger's confirmed network. Nine Mobile. Here for you, here for Ninja.
My children are athletes. From the moment they wake up, they keep playing and learning. So, when I pack the new Milo NS snacks into their lunchbox, I'm giving them a delicious snack with the goodness of malt, milk, cocoa, and crunchy Niger-grown maize containing calcium, iron, and fiber.
Milo and Snacks, snack of future champions to help your kids refuel and keep winning all day. Milo, energy to go further.
Milo! Welcome to the Dettol Shield Show. So, your question is, list multiple uses of Dettol antiseptic liquid. Your time starts now.
We use Dettol for bathing.
Correct. During and after shaving. Great.
To clean my cuts and wounds.
Yes.
We also use Dettol for cleaning surfaces like the floor and kitchen towels.
Yes, correct.
We also use Dettol for laundry.
Okay, Mrs.
Cleaning door handles.
Someone please turn off Mrs. Phillips. Dettol antiseptic liquid protects you and your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
Hi there. My name is Mercy Johnson Okoji.
My name is Jokesa
hear and when to listen.
All at your convenience. It's there on our mobile app and website.
Download the mobile app on iOS and Play Store or visit www.nigeriainfo.fm.
99.3. Let's talk.
And it's oneplay.ng. Who wants to light up your day in spite of the hard facts? You want to put money in your life, and it's to the tune of 90,000 naira. All you have to commit to even start thinking about it is 200 naira. It's a fair bargain if you ask me, and it's something that you should probably think about. Don't think about it actually. Pick up your phone, dial star 347 star 880 star 3 hash. It will cost you 200 naira from your phone. Thereafter, you would find a prompt that asks you to specify the number of tickets or entries that you want to play. That is from 1 to 10. Choose your bank, press 1 to continue, and then you get an SMS giving you specific instructions on how to make payments to complete your involvement in the draw. These draws will be happening on any of these three shows every weekday. What's Up Lagos from 11:15 to 11:25 a.m. Game On from 8:15 to 8:25 p.m. and the chat station with Ada Blessing from 10:15 to 10:25 p.m. every other weekday, like I said before. It's a system that gets to pick these numbers. It's not DOAP, so do not be mad when it happens that you don't get picked. It's not our fault, it's the system. One Play does these things, not us. Remember to play responsibly and make sure you are above the age of 18 while you are playing. Terms and conditions do apply. When you win, well, celebrate, do Thanksgiving, and then think about us.
Welcome back to Hard Facts with Sandra Ezekwesili.
I am Sandra Ezekwesili, and this is Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. I mentioned before the break that Liberia has a growing coalition of opposition parties hoping to defeat the incumbent president at the polls in October. Our guest today is the leader of one of those parties, the Movement for One Liberia. Magdala Cooper is here talking to us, talking to me, talking to you, and she's talking to the international community and the region because, as she said herself before the break, if there's a problem with Liberia, it affects the entire region, and so the region has to pay attention. Now, Magdala, what pushed you into joining politics in Liberia?
That's a great question, Sandra. I worked in corporate America for a number of years, and I started a charity called the Magdala Cooper Foundation in the early 2000s to channel support back to Liberia after the Civil War. And those efforts led me to building schools, supporting young people, women's groups, just trying to find a way to support citizens who are not being reached. We'll go to slum communities and in impoverished communities and homes where families have zero income, and we'll try to help by providing basic resources for them. Now, we realized that these efforts were really benefiting those we were reaching, and we saw the need to expand these efforts across the country. I started thinking about what would happen if we had the right policies on the books and being implemented, not just on the books, but implemented as well. And so those, charity is always a short-term solutions to long-term national problems. So with all of that, I started to get more interested in pushing the right policies and supporting the right policies of government. And so that sort of sparked my interest in going into politics because I really, we saw the result of what we did. If you build a school, put the right resources in it, adequately equipped school can give children a headway. And so I wanted to see that happen across Liberia. And so I figured politics would be the best place to make an impact across the country for all citizens born to Liberia, not just the elite, the children of the elitists, but also the children, the families living in the villages and the towns and the rural areas. Their children also need education. They need access to services, and they were not getting those services. And I wanted to be in government to make sure that Liberia was working for all Liberians. And that is why I have a party called Movement for One Liberia, because we're one people. We should benefit from whatever our country has. That should be, and so that's why I got into politics.
You mentioned before the break that Liberian politics is a boys' club. In what ways is it a boys' club?
Well, when you look at political party structure, government political parties is a reflection of what government is going to be once that party becomes a ruling party. And most political parties are built with an executive committee, right? There's an executive committee, which is the decision-making body of the party.
That's right.
Most political parties across Africa and Liberia, especially, the executive committees are committee filled with men. It's all men and their friends.
Yes.
They have these things called your youth wing on one side for the young people.
Yes.
They have this thing called the women's wing on the other side for the women.
Yes.
And when they're ready to run campaigns, they go and call the youth leader, they call the women leader, but those leaders are not on the executive committee.
Yes.
Right. And so those leaders don't have decision-making, positions in the party.
Yes.
They're just there to execute, go make noise on the street, call all the women and give them lapas and bag of rice and whatever. And then when campaign is won, they go to government and they create a cabinet filled with those men that were around the table in the political parties.
Right.
And those women in the wings remain in the wings, and those youth remain in the wing. Maybe the leaders might get something, but the rest of the people in the women's wing don't get anything.
Right.
And so when I saw this phenomenon, I thought this is complete nonsense. There are no rules of the game that says you've got to continue this type of constitution. And so when I created my political party, we sat to the table with the executives and said, for every position that is a position of decision making, we will have a male co-chair with a female.
Oh.
And that's what we did in my party. So I'm a political leader, I'm a female, and my co-chair or my vice president, running mate, whoever that was going to be a man. We have a chair, which is a woman, but she co-chaired that position with a male counterpart. We have the youth chair shared by a female youth and a male youth. Because we have got to get to, we have to understand that although I'm a Black African woman, I would never understand what it means to be a Black African man. And so I cannot speak for men. I cannot speak for the African men who are my own brothers. And so for Black men in Africa to think they can speak on behalf of women and make decisions on behalf of women, it's childish. And I think those days for that type of leadership should be over. And we have to respect women participation and representation. It is critical because when decisions are being made around the table and women are not present, yes, the men will make decisions on things that's relevant to men and the struggle of men. And if you're a 50 or 60-year-old man, you cannot speak for the young people because the young people are looking for something different than what you're looking at or looking for.
Yeah.
And so a 60-year-old man should never think he's a youth to try to make decisions on behalf of the youth. And no matter how, much we can label ourselves, you have the disabled community. And we have got to start respecting the experience of the disabled community and other minorities living in our communities. And so my executive board is made up of women, young people, men, disabled, and other minorities across the country. And I think that should be the reflection of political parties. And so we're not there fighting for quota. Because when you don't do the right thing, then they start fighting for affirmative action, start pushing affirmative action bills, and start pushing for quota system. But if you had all citizens of the country represented at the decision-making table of political parties, we will have a better parliament or better Congress and better executive branch.
Better outcomes in general. That's quite an efficient way to get it done. Make sure that there's representation at the table where decisions are being made. I have a segment on my show. It's called The Glass Ceiling. And on The Glass Ceiling, we essentially focus on how to build a more equal society. And one of the biggest conversations we have is, how do we include more women in politics? And you have people who come out and they will say things like, women are not coming forward to be voted for. When women come out to be voted for, nobody votes for them. Even women don't vote for them. And there was a woman that came out to be voted for and she got only one vote. And then I ask questions like, okay, so women are not coming out to be voted for. Women can't just come out to be voted for. If they signify interest that they want to be voted for, you have an executive board that decides, okay, we think that you're good enough to get the party's ticket. You have an executive board that has to do a lot of horse trading. And that executive board is often entirely male.
Right.
The spot for women leader, like you've just mentioned, is often tokenistic and is non-executive. And if you
Right.
have an executive board, a decision-making table that is sat upon by just one part of the society, then they're human beings. They're going to want to
Right.
prioritize the people who look like them, who think like them, who have the same
That's right.
problems that they do. So I think that
Right.
the approach that your political party has chosen is quite the interesting one. And now I would like to ask, what have been some of the major challenges, some of the hurdles that you have faced in the political space as a woman? How did you overcome
Oh,
them?
oh, look, Sandra, the hurdles that women face once you decide to be bold and take a step in the right direction, especially in terms of running for a position that gives you access to authority or decision making, it's almost like you're asking for enemies. I remember the first years of my political life, the attacks on social media, the attacks from society, the conversation that was being had about me. But one of the things that really, I stay focused. I'm a one-track minded individual. When I'm focused on something, I focus on it. When you go to the market to buy and you focus on the noise, you will never buy a thing from that market. When you go in the market, you focus on what you're going to buy, and irrespective of all the noise in the market, you go and buy your item and exit the market. And that's always been my way of functioning. And so social media, people call me all sorts of names, questions journalists would ask a male, or questions they wouldn't ask a male. They felt it was to ask me those disrespectful questions. And it changed over time when people realized that I was going nowhere. I was in this game and I was going to stay here. And the good thing is I came into the game with my own resources and my finances. So I wasn't going to my male colleagues to beg them for money. I brought my own money to the table, which is also a very good thing. When a woman comes to the table, self-empowered, equipped, ready to fight your battles, and just know that the battle was never mine to begin with, in the sense that I was here fighting for Liberia. I grew up, I did my university in the United States. I had a job in the United States, a high-paying job. I had a home in the United States, but my calling was to come home to Africa to help bring Africa into its promise, starting with my own country, starting with my own community, and beyond. And so that was the purpose and the reason why I left the Western world and all of what it had to offer me. The life of privilege, the life of success, the good life. I left all of those, walked away from it to come back home to Liberia, where I barely have electricity. I barely have running water. I barely have good roads. There's no road safety. When someone hits your car, you're on your own. You have to feed people constantly on a daily basis, support communities, support people, pay students tuition. I left the Western world to come home to make a sacrifice for my country, because the Western world was developed by those who made a sacrifice to develop it for their offsprings and their future generations. And we, the young Africans that had the privilege to go abroad to study and gain wisdom and knowledge and global understanding and how to build nations, we have to come back home to our countries to build it. And so my struggle wasn't a personal one. My struggle was about my people, my nation, my continent. I'm a proud Black woman. And I understood those things. I understood my mandate. I knew who Magdala Cooper is and what she stood for and what she stands for. And so when the challenges and the attacks, the unnecessary attacks came against me during my first years and the years after, I could care less, Sandra. I focused on my work. I did what I came to do. And today I'm one of the most respected voices in my nation, and if not across the region. And so you got to stand strong and let people know that their little noise in the market is not going to impact or affect what you're here to do. And eventually the noise faded away. So the challenges, there are plenty. the violence against women in politics, the insults, the traditional belief system that women should not be in position of authority or decision making. Women are good enough to run charities, but never to be a president. You know, all these things are said. But again, I left the Western world to come home to sacrifice to make a better Liberia, and that's what I would do until God calls me home.
All right, Lagos, if you just tuned in, hi, good evening. I've got a politician from Liberia on the show today. We left Nigeria just a little bit, and we're talking about the upcoming elections in October in Liberia. You have a growing coalition of opposition parties hoping to defeat the current president, George Weah, at the polls in October. Our guest is the leader of one of those parties, the Movement for One Liberia. Her name is Magdala Cooper. Lagos, join the conversation on 0700 993 993 993 01465 7190. On WhatsApp, I've got a lot of messages. We've got this one here that says, this is from Tare in Lekki. Tare says, just listening to your guest, it's the same greed of political dealers happening in Liberia. It's exactly the same corrupting influence ravaging African countries today. And when coup happens now, Unagose Kaki boys should go back to barracks. As it is happening, the corruption in Liberia, ECOWAS is not talking until army gets involved. Then you now see them start shouting. Okay. You know, that it's interesting that you mention the coup, Tare. It's interesting you mentioned that because if we tie back to what Magdala said when we initially started talking, we're all West Africans. We're all members of ECOWAS. We're watching the aftermath of a coup in Niger Republic. ECOWAS has declared sanctions on Niger. Does your party, MOL, does your party support the ECOWAS decision? If your coalition wins the polls in October, will a President Boakai continue to support the ECOWAS sanction regime?
Well, I have to speak to Bokai about that. I try to make sure I don't speak for him. I was labeled or named, appointed by Bokai to be the head on finance and resource mobilization. And so I try to stay in that zone. But in terms of ECOWAS, we ourselves just issue a major letter to ECOWAS, explaining and listing our concerns as to what we see is going to happen in this election. Today, the government has a paramilitary group that's there trained purposefully for the elections, to disrupt the election, and granted, if their candidate lose. And so we wrote a letter to ECOWAS stating all of the things that we're concerned with. And I do hope ECOWAS wouldn't just pay attention to the aftermath of what has taken place in Niger, but also pay attention to the clarion call that we have made to them from Liberia, saying that we are concerned about this upcoming election, and this election can throw the region off. Granted, the wrong thing is done in Liberia, and so I do hope, Sandra, that they will heed to our call and our message from Liberia, from the opposition bloc.
Magdala Cooper, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us on Nigeria info as soon as you came into the country. And we do hope you have a great trip while you're here.
Thank you so much, Sandra. It was wonderful to be here with you today.
Yes. Lagos, we've got 3 minutes before we have to take a break. Let's talk about what you've heard this evening. 0700-993-993, 993-993, 01465 7190. While I was listening to her, I was like, oh my God, Africa really is a country. Why do we get so angry when people call Africa a country? 99.3, hello.
Hello, yeah. Is this Nigeria Info?
This is Nigeria Info, yes. What's your name, sir?
Yeah, my name is Philip. I'm calling all the way from Adamo, Ikorodu.
Okay, welcome. Talk to me.
Yes. Hello, Sandra. Yes, I let me start by thank you. This is my first time calling.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. Mm-hmm. And yes, going by your guest breakdown, I am touched. In fact, my worry right now is that Africa has a peculiar way of behaving when it comes to politics. I'm not seeing the game very different from what we have here in the country, and it's worrisome. I pray that the kind of leaders we'll be producing in Africa, let them be people-oriented and have a sense of direction. Because Africa is suffering, we are suffering. it is not a good thing going to war. The scenario in Sudan is not a homecoming news because people are dying. So I think we have a vibrant society. Nigeria is well coordinated. We should be proud of our country. We should be proud of what we're doing and try to put the right people in the right place.
All right. Thank you very much for calling. Speaking of right people in the right place, screening still ongoing at the Senate at the moment. Screening of the president's ministerial nominees, that is. While I was speaking with Magdala, I watched them screen Betta Edu. Betta Edu is one of the nominees. They're screening the fourth woman at the moment. I'm not sure who this is. I'm going to have to wait until a name tag comes up on the screen so that I'll be able to be sure who is currently answering questions from Senate President Godswill Akpabio. But that's actually all the time we have on today's show. I'll be back tomorrow, though. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. here, bright and early, bringing you the Big Three, as always. There's so much going on. We couldn't get into all of it on the Big Three today because of the screening, but not to worry. Tomorrow, we'll get into it. Wednesday, we'll get into it as well. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili on social media. Ezekwesili everywhere. Those were your hard facts. Lagos, have yourselves a fantastic evening. Good night.
Uncle Dentist, what are cavities and how does Colgate protect my teeth from cavities? Does it use Kung Fu?
No, dear. Most tooth pains are caused by tooth holes called cavities. When you brush daily with Colgate Maximum Cavity Protection, its expert formula locks natural calcium in our teeth and helps protect them from cavities.
It's time to upgrade to the world's most chosen toothpaste.
And I want to assume that you would run because I want to give the listeners context for the conversation.
In 2019, you were running mate to Atiku Abubakar. What did you learn then that you will not repeat this time?
Yes, when is the president coming out to address us?
There's a few things. One, I have a burden and a passion for young people.
The fact that you have elected a man does not mean then you begin to order him around. The president will do whatever is good for the country at any given time.
Mr. Adeshino, isn't the president responsible to the people?
What should the next president do to root out stakeholders who are complicit?
You fire those. Those that need to be fired are fired.
It's looking like a brand new Chelsea, attacking with so much fluidity. And what can you say about that, Martin? I know you follow Chelsea quite closely.
I live close to the Chelsea training ground. That's what you mean by that. I'm not.